A couple of months ago, I got a telephone call, and I answered the phone. It's on my cell phone, and there is what sounds like a fairly young lady on the other end. And she said, "Mr. Massey, you have violated the IRS order to pay your taxes, and we are about to seize your bank account and take everything out of your bank account. And I just want to know if you want to try to work this out this morning." I said to her, direct quote, first thing I said, "Do you know that you're lying?" She said, "What?" I said, "Are you working for somebody who's telling you that this stuff is true, or are you aware that you are lying for a living?" And she says, "No, Mr. Matthew, you don't understand. You're behind on your taxes." I said, "No, I do understand. You're lying. Do you understand?" And then another voice came in and clicked in and said something and cut off the call. But you know what it's like to be lied to. Some of you have gotten emails pretending to be from me that are lying to you about owing me money. And I feel horrible about that. And it's not from me. They're lies. They're lies. And one of the things that disturbs me the most is that a lot of people think that lying is okay. Amen. That it's not wrong. Or at least it's not always wrong. We've been looking at a series of lessons on right and wrong, on morality. And we started the year looking at a passage from Mark chapter 10 where a rich young ruler comes to Jesus and he says, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus sort of avoids his question at first and then answers his question. But in the avoiding of his question, Jesus lays down a little foundation of what builds a good life. And he says, "You know the commandments. Do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not defraud, do not bear false witness, honor your father and mother." So what we've been talking about this year, since then, is right and wrong and these different parts of morality, these different things. And we started out talking about where morality comes from and how it proceeds from the very nature of God, from the very divine purpose of God. His invisible attributes and divine nature being seen through what has been made. And one of the other things that we've been talking about, which really prompted me to want to talk about this for a few weeks, is a survey that was released late last year from the Barna group. And on this particular point, it stands out in very, very sharp contrast. When we talked about attitudes towards sexual behavior a couple of weeks ago, the attitudes from generation to generation weren't really that far apart. And if the youngest people, if our teenagers feel like I was picking on them, then on that subject it wasn't completely fair, because the attitudes of the older generation, my generation, and even the generation ahead of me, isn't that far from the youngest generation. But on this one there's pretty good distance, but not nearly as much as there ought to be. But you think about this survey. One of the questions on this survey says, lying is morally wrong. Okay, very simple, very straightforward question. Lying is morally wrong. And you have 4 choices: strongly agree. Maybe you have 5. I didn't actually see the survey, but I saw the results that they gave. But they didn't give you all the results. They just give you a story about the results. So my information is a little bit limited. The only results that I know are the ones that strongly agree. But there's also an agree, maybe a neutral, neither one, and then disagree and strongly disagree. So probably 5 categories. I'm not certain. On this statement, lying is morally wrong. The elders, which is basically the World War II generation, 61% strongly agree. The baby boomer generation, the generation of my parents, people who are now into their 60s and 70s, 54% strongly agree. Lying is morally wrong. Generation X, my generation, 50%, half and half, 50% strongly agree. Lying is morally wrong. Millennials, 42% strongly agree. And then Generation Z, people who are teenagers right now, people born from 1998 to 2005, 34%. 66% of teenagers, therefore, say something at least as bad as, it depends. 2/3, 66% don't strongly agree that lying is morally wrong. This is a gigantic problem. And it reflects the undercutting of the truth in our culture. Somewhere in the 70s or 80s, the people who study societies and culture and things of that nature say we left modernism and entered into postmodernism. And postmodernism, one of its fundamental ideas is that there is no truth, there is no objective reality, there is no absolute right and wrong. And so I have grown up mostly in that culture, but that culture is now much stronger today than it was in 1973 when I was born. And so our children are growing up where almost everybody thinks that it's at least okay to lie sometimes. And you see this in our politicians. You see this in our athletes. You see this in our business leaders. You see this in the religious world. You see this in the sales world. You see this in the education world. People lie for all kinds of reasons. They lie to stay out of trouble. They lie because it's fun to lie. They lie because they think they're helping somebody by not telling them the truth. Well, they're wrong. They're just dead, crazy wrong. If you look here in Exodus chapter 23, what Brother Jack read for us, and if you think back to Exodus chapter 20, where God gives the people at the foot of Mount Sinai the 10 Commandments, the ninth commandment, you shall not bear false witness. You shall not bear false witness. But then when you get into Exodus 23 and you get into Leviticus 19, that gets expanded. But it starts out very interestingly in the judicial context. It literally is talking about don't lie in court, or don't lie when there is a legal inquiry trying to decide something. And so we see a lot of scriptures about this. Proverbs 14:25, a truthful witness saves lives, but he who utters lies is treacherous. Now our young people don't realize the extent of this problem yet, hopefully, because of their limited experience in the world. But if you have worked for very many employers in your life, chances are, at one point or another, there's been pressure put on you to say something or to record something that's not true. I've seen businesses and employers put extreme pressure on employees to falsify records, to say they didn't see something that they did see, to say they weren't somewhere that they were. I had a witness tell me one time, yes, I saw the ice, but I won't testify to it, and if you call me to testify, I'll say I didn't see it. People are put under this tremendous pressure to lie in legal contexts. And it is evil, and it is wrong, and it's a crime. It's perjury when it's under oath even today, and it's one of the 10 Commandments. And the reason it's one of the 10 Commandments is because telling the truth creates justice, it allows justice, and it protects everyone. If you look back here at verse 7 again, it says, keep far from a false charge and do not kill the innocent. You see, lying leads to destruction and death. A person who won't tell the truth in a legal context allows injustice to flourish, allows dangerous behavior to flourish, and takes away the protection that innocent people are supposed to have. And so if we want to be innocent, if we want to do right, we want that doing right to keep us out of trouble and to provide a remedy when we're wronged. But if people won't tell the truth, that goes away. And danger is increased dramatically. But it's much broader than court testimony. If you go to Leviticus chapter 19, one of the things that Jesus said is a really interesting thing that we've talked about many, many times. When Jesus says, what is the greatest commandment? He said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your mind. And then He says, the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Well, if you go to Exodus 20 or Deuteronomy 6 and you look at the 10 Commandments, you don't see that one anywhere. You can read commandment after commandment after commandment in the Old Testament looking for this second greatest commandment in the Old Testament. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Well, guess what? It's in Leviticus 19. It's in a long list of commandments. And a lot of those commandments in Leviticus 19 are about lying, about not telling the truth. Leviticus 19 verse 11 says, you shall not steal, nor deal falsely, nor lie to one another. So you see, in the 10 Commandments in Exodus 20, it says, you shall not bear false witness. But in Leviticus 19, it takes it all the way down to the very fine point. You shall not lie. You shall not lie. And it's in the same chapter that says you shall love your neighbor as yourself, which Jesus says is the second greatest commandment, because all of the other commandments fit in that. And so the Bible's teaching about truth. The Bible's teaching about being honest. The Bible's teaching about having integrity is all about this idea of loving your neighbor. But it has a greater power than even that. Because to be close to God requires truth. Now you think about our culture today. Our culture today says that 13 billion years ago, I don't really know, it's something like that, but whatever. 13 billion years ago, all of the atoms in the universe were combined together in something that's microscopic, something that you wouldn't even be able to see with the naked eye, or something really small if it doesn't say it's that small. And then, all of a sudden, it exploded and our universe was created. And then over billions of years, matter and dust and gas and smoke swirled around and started forming stars. And then they grabbed asteroids and turned these asteroids into planets. And then these planets started making water and nitrogen and oxygen coming together and carbon. And then it started making single-celled organisms. And then it finally grew into intelligent life. And then intelligent life started saying, where did I come from? That's the religion of our time. That's the origin story that human beings in Western civilization are telling themselves today. It's fabricated. There's no evidence for it. It's completely false. Now, if you believe that story, then you believe there's no such thing as right and wrong. There's no such thing as morality. There's no such thing as an absolute standard. And what's more, when you die, there will be no judgment. There will be no reckoning. There will be no divine balancing of the scales. And no standard by which you could be judged, even if there were. But what if that's wrong? What if that's false? What if there is an all-powerful Creator who spoke the heavens and the earth into existence? And what if right and wrong flows from His character and from His purpose? And what if, after your physical body dies, your spirit goes on, and after your physical death, there is going to be a divine reckoning where you stand before your spiritual Creator and He asks you to pay for the wrong that you did? Well, brother and sister, you need to know the truth. Amen. You need to know which one is true and which one's false. Truth is important. It's everything. It's everything. Without truth, you are powerless. You are helpless. With truth, everything changes. And that's why lying is so dangerous. That's why lying is so destructive and so evil. Because it hurts people. Jesus came to testify to this truth and to reveal this truth. John chapter 1 verse 1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being by Him, and apart from Him nothing came into being that has come into being." Verse 4 says, "In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it." To understand the power, the importance of truth, you have to understand this idea of light and darkness. You think about a group of people thousands of years ago praying to some stone image that they created with their own hands and asking that stone image to deliver them or to save them from their enemy or to bring them rain. You think about how useless that is. You think about what a waste of time and effort that is. They're living in the dark. They're in the dark ages praying to a piece of rock because they don't have the truth. Jesus is the light of men. In Him was life. Life, and that life was the light of men. Come forward to John chapter 3. He's talking to Nicodemus. He says, this is the judgment. In verse 19, John chapter 3, verse 19. "This is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and men love the darkness rather than the light, for their deeds were evil. For everyone who does evil hates the light and does not come to the light for fear that his deeds will be exposed." You think about a lie you've told. You think about why you told that lie. I don't want to tell you about any of mine because it's too embarrassing, and I especially don't want my kids to hear them. But I know we've all got them. But you think about it, and you think about why you lied. What was your motivation? For most of us, we didn't want our deeds to be exposed. We didn't want people to know what we had really done. We didn't want people to know what was inside us, what our real intent was, what our real motive was, whatever the case may be. And this is part and parcel of a relationship with Christ. You have to face this. You have to face not only the truth of who He is, you have to face the fact that life is in Him and in His truth. And you have to be willing to bring the darkness that is in you to Him and allow His light to dispel that darkness. That means no lying. That means that we don't have anything to do with falsehood and fraud and cheating. We are people of light. We are people of truth. We are people of transparency. Jesus said in John chapter 8, verse 32, "You will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." You can't be free from sin. You can't be free from Satan. You can't be free from hell without the truth. That makes the truth extremely important and extremely powerful, and something that you have to be completely committed to. John chapter 14, verse 6, Jesus said, "I am the way and the truth and the life." There we have those two ideas together again. The truth and the life. Before it was life and light, now it's truth and life. Truth and light, practically the same thing. I am the truth, says Jesus. You want to be with Christ? You want to have a relationship with God? You have to embrace truth. You have to make truth fundamental to your being, fundamental of who you are and what you are. And notice this word that Jesus uses at the beginning, I am. When Jesus used that word to Jewish listeners, it was like a bomb going off. I am. When He said before Abraham was, I am, what's He doing? He's claiming the name of God. If you go back to Exodus chapter 3, when Moses was first introduced to the God of heaven and earth, God appeared to Moses on a mountain. And He tells Moses, I want you to go and lead my people out of Egypt. Tell them that God has sent you to them. And Moses says, I don't know who you are. I don't know your name. Who will I tell them what God has sent me? Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. God said to Moses, I am who I am. And He said, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God furthermore said to Moses, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever. And this is my memorial name to all generations. My memorial name. God's name. When God met with Adam, in the record that we have in Genesis, we don't have his name. When God appeared to Noah, He didn't tell Noah his name, as far as we know. When God appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, He didn't give them His name. When He appeared to Moses, He gave His name. And you can see the way it's translated in the New American Standard is probably different from the translation that some of you have, because it's very difficult to translate. It comes from 3 little Hebrew letters. And in English we put 4 letters with it. YHWH. Sometimes pronounced Yahweh. When they took the Hebrew and the Greek and they brought it into English, they changed it to Jehovah. All going back to this passage. But what it means in the original Hebrew, as far as they can tell, is it means, it's very similar to our word be or become. To be, to become, was, is, will be. It's all of these ideas, and what it is the idea of existence, the idea of reality, the idea of I am, I was, I will be. That's my name, being. I am who I am is the way the New American Standard translates it. That's God's name. What does it say? It says, I am about reality. I am the God who exists. I'm not the God that you cut out of a rock. I'm not the God that you project your fantasies on. I am real, and there is truth, and it is absolute. And if you want to have anything to do with me, you got to face the fact that truth is powerful and important. And that means no lying. Lying is choosing darkness against God. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 8, Paul says, For you were formerly darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of the light consists in all goodness and righteousness and truth, trying to learn what is pleasing to the Lord. Do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but instead even expose them. That's a hard teaching, and it's especially hard teaching for teenagers. Do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but instead even expose them. Brothers and sisters, I think we're falling short in being the kind of people who outwardly and clearly stand against darkness. I think we're falling short in setting an example for our young people that we are different from the world. That we don't walk this fine line between light and darkness and try to keep a lot of us in the light but not be too unfamiliar with the darkness and know how to get around in the darkness when we need to. And what the Bible says is, expose these dark deeds. Be truthful. Be honest. And what we're talking about here is the idea of integrity. Psalm 15, verses 1 and 2 says, O Lord, who may abide in your tent? Who may dwell on your holy hill? The idea is, who can be close to you, God? Who can live in your house? Who can have a close relationship with you? The answer is, he who walks with integrity and works righteousness and speaks truth in his heart. The word integrity is a really interesting word. Same root word from which we get the word integer. An integer is a whole number. It's the same root word from which we get entire, integrated, integral. All of these come from this word, and that's what it means. It means whole, a whole number, a whole one, a complete thing, entire. The Bible says that people, God's people especially, are to walk in integrity. What that means is that we are not to be divided. We are not to have part of us here and part of us there. We're not to be divided up into church self and work self and play self and home self. We're just one. We're the same all the time. And we have our purpose at work and our purpose at school and our purpose at church and our purpose at home and our purpose on the playground all together. It's all one thing. It's not a bunch of things. And that's what integrity is. Integrity is being the same, being straightforward and clear all the time. Now, in our culture, the way we use it always refers to good things, to good character. A person of integrity is a person who is trustworthy, he has good qualities, and he follows those qualities and displays those qualities all the time. But it really means that you're together, that you're always the same, that you're not hypocritical, that you're not two-faced. And that's what it's about. I had an issue a few years ago where there was a deal going on and a government official had to sign off and to approve this deal. And the government official told one of the people involved on one side of the deal that the people on the other side of the deal had backed out. It wasn't true. They called the other side of the deal and said, no, we didn't say that. We're not backing out. Just made it up out of whole cloth. Because the official didn't want to have to deal with it. Didn't really feel qualified to deal with it. So they just made it up. No, it's off. Other person backed out. Complete lie. This person's divided. Supposed to be doing one thing, doing something else to keep from doing the first. It's a lie. Psalm 51 verse 6 says, "Behold, you desire truth in the innermost being, and the hidden part you will make me know wisdom." Psalm 101 verse 7, "He who practices deceit shall not dwell in my house. He who speaks falsehood shall not maintain his position before me." You see, God is reality. He is the great I am. I am who I am. I was, I am, I will be. Being. Truth. Jesus, I am the way and the truth and the life. Truth flows from the reality of God, from the very nature of God. His voice creates truth. His voice creates reality. And so as His creation, as the creations of His purpose, truth is fundamental to our lives. You can't deal with your cancer if you don't know the truth that you have it or what it is. You can't balance your checkbook if you don't have the truth of what checks you've written or what deposits you've made. Truth is everywhere and in everything. And to be a person who is okay with lying, who says, well, sometimes maybe it's all right. You're turning your back on the great I am. You're turning your back on the Creator of truth, the foundation of reality. And that's why it's wrong. It's always wrong. It's wrong every time. And that's what God wants us to know. I hope you'll be different. I hope every person here will be different than that big segment of our peers who thinks that lying is not necessarily morally wrong. I hope our young people especially will have the courage to be people of the light, who expose the deeds of darkness and refuse to walk in deceit. It'll make you different. It'll make you stand out. It will bring you bad treatment from some people. But it will make your life far better because it will align it with God. If your life is not aligned with God, if you haven't been walking in His light, you have an opportunity to change that right now. If you need to come to Christ for the first time, if you need to return to Christ, whatever your need, please come down front as we stand and sing.